back everyone to the Garmin VIRB XE Part 2 Quick Look. Now Part 2 is going to mainly focus on video quality and photo quality. Part 1 was all about the hardware, and there actually is going to be a Part 3 that goes more deeply into the G-Metrix and Garmin VIRB software. And before we dive too deep into things, I really just wanted to give a big shout out to Santa Barbara Helicopters Tours. Now, I've become friends with these guys over time. I've definitely used their services a lot for MarkHawkCam, but for testing out the Garmin VIRB XE, it has a bunch of sensors that are recording a bunch of data such as elevation, G-forces, speed, GPS. Just filming in the helicopter gave us the ability to test all of those things at once, and they did it very last minute. So if you're in the area and you're looking for an adventure, I would definitely check them out or follow them on Instagram or Twitter, and just watch out for deals and just awesome events. So anyway, we're going to start out by taking a look at 1440p. Now this is filming in 1920 by 1440. You might look at this and go, hey, this looks 4:3. I don't want black bars on the side of my screen. Well, the nice thing about 1440p is actually when you make it 100%, it's the same as if you're filming at 1080p. The only difference is now if we want to sort of adjust the angle, like maybe we want to see the ocean more, so we're actually pushing the plate up, or maybe we want to see less of the ocean, so we're pushing the plate down, but then we have the rotor props in there, so if we push it up just a little bit, we can actually get a really good proper framing. That's one of the big benefits of filming at 1440p, is in case you're pointed too far down or too far up, or if you're in a sort of tight area, like this, like the inside of the helicopter here, we're actually seeing everything. Now on the left here, we're filming with the GoPro Hero 4 Silver at 1440p, and the VIRB XE is filming at 1440p as well, except now we have Steady Shot turned on, and what Steady Shot's going to allow us to do is going to remove a lot of those little minor imperfections, such as handshakes, or in this case, a lot of the vibration from the helicopter. Now, the VIRB XE, I originally thought the Steady Shot on would actually reduce our field of view by quite a bit, and while it is reducing some of our field of view, it's actually not reducing a ton, and we can actually stack on a bunch of these options and enable Steady Shot. And what I mean by that is, like, if we have field of view at wide, we can switch that to zoom, which is the equivalent of GoPro's medium, or ultra zoom, which is the equivalent of GoPro's narrow field of view. And then with the VIRB XE, if we also wanted to turn on something like its other option called lens rectification, that will actually remove a lot of the lens distortion. So what we can do is we can actually leave all of those options on and then turn Steady Shot on, and we can just basically customize it the way we want. So in this shot on the left here, I actually have the GoPro Hero 4 Silver set to a more medium field of view at 1080p, because I expected the Garmin VIRB XE to zoom in a little more, and I wanted them to kind of be on par. But even with Steady Shot on, we have our field of view set to wide. When it does its Steady Shot, it doesn't zoom in nearly as much to kind of keep everything nice and still. Now this could be just the VIRB XE doesn't want to create a lot of warping in the footage like we've seen in stuff like the Sony Action Cam. It definitely is removing a little bit of those shakes, but it maybe is not doing it to the extreme level that the Sony Action Camera is. And what this actually, basically what this helps reduce is a lot of that warpiness that we've seen on things like the Sony Action Camera. Now the VIRB XE is capable of filming at 120 frames per second, or even 240 frames per second at much lower resolutions. So at 720p we can record at 120 frames per second, which we've now just dropped to 25% speed. So it's actually playing back at 30 frames per second. And you can see just how slow the RPMs of the helicopter appear to be now that we've dropped it 1/4 of the speed. Now we could just film at 240 frames a second, but unfortunately that's at 480p, which I feel is a much lower resolution than is really worth using. And even when we're at 720p, I'm noticing a lot of anti-aliasing in the just mostly every hard edge here. If you look at the tail rudder, if you look at just the bubble of the cockpit, you're again going to notice a lot of aliasing. And another area we're going to notice a lot of aliasing is actually at 1440p. And one of the big selling points with the VIRB XE is that it has the capability of filming at 1440p, and we mentioned all the benefits of that earlier in this video. However, filming in 1440p is far from the best quality you can get out of this camera. When you're filming at 1440p, take a look at the roof of the car. There's just a lot of aliasing. The cars in the background are very soft. When we actually switch to 1080p here, those cars in the background instantly get a lot sharper. The roof line looks way crisper. There's none of that aliasing. We're going to quickly go back and forth between these two clips and just take a look at the railing. Look at the text on the side of the cars in the background. Just filming at 1080p, 30 frames a second, and specifically specifically 30 frames a second, actually gives us much better quality when we're looking at these two settings side by side. Just things like the text on the car are much sharper on the right side of your screen at 1080p than they are at 1440p. Now, I'm not too sure what's causing this. I'm really hoping it's some sort of oversight that can be firmware patched in, but generally big issues like this are more hardware related or more to do with how a focal lens is affecting before the light gets to the image sensor. So maybe the lens on the camera would have to be shifted. It could be a number of things. I'm not 100% sure. All I know is that filming at 1920 by 1080 at 30 frames a second results in the best quality you can get out of the VIRB XE. Now at 60 frames a second we get very similar quality, but it's just slightly softer. We'll kind of go into that more when we get to the underwater section of this video. It's a little disappointing that 1440p, the one resolution that I want to film in most because it gives me the most advantage to get the shot I want, is far from the best quality, and then it has very big issues such as anti-aliasing, which is a big upset, and then the soft footage in the background, also kind of a huge bummer. Now the XE does have the ability to record in a flat color mode. Now this might look washed out to you, but the big advantage of this is this gives us a much more range when we go to color correct this later on. Our blacks, if you notice underneath the wheel, there's a lot more different shades of gray than if we crunch it down into just being very dark. In our whites, we have a much bigger range of whites, which is why a lot of this looks washed out. Now if we were to apply something like a color look like this, we can easily adjust this. We can take the highlights, we can crunch them down, we can take the darks, we can really adjust them the way we want. But if we were to use the original footage that was filmed with the vivid color mode, you can see when we apply this same color treatment, a lot of the areas get crunched way down, so we lose a lot of that information in the car wheel. A lot of that information in the background where we have the sort of white sort of sky, a lot of that is just blown out because the information that was there is all too similar. When it comes to recording colors though, and just picking them up in an environment where it's locked off and greatly saturated like this, the VIRB XE does a great job. Like, there's just a tremendous amount of colors here. They all look very rich and beautiful. Nothing's crunching out in a weird way. Like actually the Hero 4 Silver, that red area in the upper right, when we do our side by side, you'll see a lot of clipping and a lot of weird boxes in there. And that's actually a really nice thing that I'm seeing with the XE. Normally, when we have like these bright blue skies or these areas that just have a very sort of high, very intense value, a lot of other cameras such as this bright blue sky here will start to show artifacting. And while I did see that every now and then on the XE, for every one time I saw that on the XE, I saw it maybe 12 times on a GoPro or a Sony action camera. I'm just not seeing a lot of the same color issues I've had with other cameras. So that's actually kind of a relief to see that there is a sort of quality improvement. Now actually what we're doing here is we're turning on and off lens rectification. What lens rectification does is actually removing a lot of that lens distortion in the camera. Now with the GoPro series of cameras, you actually have to do this in post with the GoPro Hero 4 software, but here we're actually able to do it in camera and we don't have to do any of that work later. Now here we're doing a 1920 by 1080, again that best setting we can do, and we have different field of view options in our video format without lens rectification or stabilization. We can activate zoom, and then there's also an ultra zoom, which is really good if you're doing like aerial work. Now, since the VIRB XE has its own built-in dive case, right out of the box we can throw it underwater and not worry about it getting damaged. And it also has a flat lens, so we won't have to do any sort of special upgrades in order to get sort of the best results we can out of water. The only thing we can really do to make sure things stay nice is actually filming at 1080p 30 frames a second. Now we switch over to 60 frames a second here. Take a look at those blue tiles in the upper left. You'll notice there's a lot more information when we're filming at 30 frames a second than opposed to 60 frames a second. We'll just pause it right here real quick. Take a look at the detail on the left on sort of my chin hairs, and at 60 frames a second on the right side, you notice a lot of that is very soft and muddy, and the same things with the tiles in the background. And the audio quality from the VIRB XE underwater is kind of intense, to put it mildly. So the VIRB XE basically being built into a dive housing right out of the box definitely gives it some audio technical issues that it's going to have to deal with, such as audio being slightly muffled or tinny at points, but it's far from unusual. But I just want to make you guys aware that this is something sort of like a concert would sound like on the VIRB XE.
Spending all my money on a Saturday night. Baby, I just wonder what you're doing in the back of your pink Cadillac. Pink Cadillac. Honey, I just wonder what you're doing.
Overall, with most of the quality I'm getting out of the VIRB XE, I actually am quite happy, especially with things like lens distortion and color. I think those are going definitely in the right direction. I do wish it was a little sharper in areas, and some of the softness and anti-aliasing issues we're seeing in 1440p or when using 30 frames a second is a bit of a bummer, but I'm hoping that's something that can be worked out later on. Now, when we're filming in nighttime, we start to see some kind of weird issues, especially with this type of lighting. What would that be? Incandescent lighting? Basically, lights that are in the more bluer temperature, especially when we're in an ISO of 6400. When we switch it down to 1600, it's a little more manageable, but again, it doesn't do super great in low light like something like the Sony action camera, but it is pretty acceptable, especially when we're doing still photography in low light, which we'll get to in a little bit. On the left here, we have an ISO of 1600. On the right, we have an ISO of 6400. My general rule of thumb is never to go above 1600, but I know a lot of you would like to see what the results are, especially on a new line of cameras, so we're just kind of showing the differences. With this chevron, for example, or that sign in the upper left, you can definitely see that when we're at 1600 ISO, you can actually read what that sign says. 6400 just sort of blows it out. A lot of the water detail that you see in the fountains does look better at 1600, but again, it is still pretty dark. So in the hardware section, we mentioned how easy it is to take photos and switch to video. Now with the XE, we're actually taking photos at a resolution of 4000 by 3000, which is a 4:3 format, and we're using a 12 megapixel lens, so it's very similar to the GoPro Hero series. Now the quality we're getting out of these are amazing to me. They're actually really, really good. If you look at all of the sort of detail that's in the back of the helicopter here, just all of the detail it's picking up inside the cockpit, there's a great range of just colors and information. Things seem pretty sharp. We're picking up little bits of detail here, like all these little sort of plugs in the ceiling. And then especially when we're filming in low light, the camera actually detects we're in low light and lights up the scene quite a bit. In fact, it's really hard to convey how much brighter it's making a lot of these nighttime shots without having a shot that we're traditionally used to seeing. I don't really have that information for you other than things like this hallway were completely dark, and with me not adjusting any settings, the camera automatically detects it's dark and brightens it up. Now that could be a problem if there's sort of motion in the scene, but generally if we're taking photos at night, we're kind of aware that there's going to be motion blur, especially with things like action cameras because of it having such a small image sensor. So when it came to photo quality, was really impressed and was actually really, really impressed with the low light capabilities for photos. Anyway, everyone, that only sort of wraps up our video quality coverage of the VIRB XE. You're definitely going to want to check out the side-by-side comparison against the GoPro Hero 4 Silver. It should be up in a few days once I've posted this video. We're going to go into much more detail on the quality of the VIRB XE. It's going to be a much longer video and a bigger analysis on what the VIRB XE is doing right, what it's doing wrong, and maybe what some of the issues are and how we can sort of solve them. Anyway, be sure to like, subscribe, and share this video. It helps me out immensely, and it doesn't cost you anything, but if you are willing to throw a few bucks my way, please head on over to my Patreon page, trying to reach the stretch goal of making $10 a month on this channel. So just go there, donate that, and it'll help me immensely as I try and save up for important things like future medical costs and very important things that we'll talk about in the future. But anyway, I'm MarkHawk. Be sure to like again, subscribe, visit our newly launched MarkHawkCam.com. And yeah, what does everybody here think of the Garmin VIRB XE? We still have one more part to go that goes over a lot of the G-Metrix data, which is actually one of the more interesting things the Garmin VIRB line of cameras is bringing to the action camera market. Anyway, be sure to check out part 3. It's already recorded and it should be uploading soon as well. Let us know what you thought in the comments section below. I'm MarkHawk, and I'll see you all out there. Have a good one, everyone.